They slapped a neon notice at my eye level like a dare. Violation, demolish in 30 days, and the man beside it, in a pretend uniform, called me sir, like he was doing me a favor. And in that moment, I realized the silence I had bought with my savings was about to get loud. So I did the one thing that ever saved my skin. I hit record. My name is Graham Hollister, and I came back to my grandfather's old red house to breathe, not to fight. But when someone tries to take your place with fake papers and bully theater, you either yell or you document. And I've learned the hard way that evidence speaks cleaner than anger. I had paid $340,000 to buy back 2 acres and a 1920 house my grandfather built with his own hands. The kind of carpentry that doesn't complain when the wind pushes at night, just creaks and holds. And because old habits die slow, I set 4 cameras under the eaves, a couple of mics inside, and locked my deed and certified copies in a fireproof safe with scanned backups in the cloud. Not because I was paranoid, because I was done losing things that were mine. The knock came on a Thursday at 9 a.m. Sharp 3 hard raps with a rhythm that tries to teach you your place. And when I opened, a woman in a gray suit smiled the way a sticker smiles and said, "Good morning, Mr. Hollister. I'm Vanessa Kirkland representing the Homeowners Association for this area. You are in violation. This structure must be demolished within 30 days. And beside her, a stocky man in navy tried to look official without a badge number or a name tag, and introduced himself as Officer Garrett Finch, like the word officer could make his patch less blurry. I did what I always do. I asked for documents, county registration jurisdiction, an actual badge. And while they were busy making authority sounds, I was busy taking photos, noting the Garamond font on their Bylaws packet, the pixelated logo at the top, the absence of any seal stamp or notary, the business card with a P.O. box and no address, and when I said I would verify with the county before taking any action, Finch tried to puff up the porch air. We have full enforcement authority, but I'd spent 12 years interviewing real cops and real clerks and real crooks, and the difference is not subtle once you've seen it up close. They left with a threat smile. I closed the door, and my kitchen table became a case file timeline at the top. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. First contact claims made red flags, and with every detail I logged. Blurred patch wrong paper, no seal. My pulse calmed, because the way you fight a lie is you lay out the truth like tools on a bench. Each one labeled, each one ready. Day 12, I woke to a bright yellow sticker on my door: violation. Cease and desist with a county name that didn't exist on my tax bill, Springfield County, which would be hilarious if it weren't meant to scare. And I photographed the tape, scanned the paper, filed it in a folder called Fake Government, then added a line to the timeline that simply read, "Wrong county, wrong seal, wrong guy." Day 14. A real code enforcement officer called, weary voice, too many cases, and said they'd received a report I was doing unpermitted construction, and I emailed my stamped permits within 5 minutes because I keep them in a folder called Ready for People Who Think I'm Stupid. And an hour later, she called back and said, "You're good, we're closing it." And when I asked, casual, just making conversation, whether that complainant name ever crossed her desk, before she paused and said, "I can't share specifics, but you're not the first to ask about that name." And that was all I needed to know. Day 16, the flyers showed up like weeds. Warning to residents. New homeowner refuses to comply with safety regulations. Property values at risk. Signed by something called the Riverside Community Management Association that doesn't exist in any registry. And I walked the street collecting them like evidence confetti. Noting the same paper stock as the fake bylaws, the same ink bleed the same error. And by afternoon, the couple that used to wave crossed to the other side of the road like caution tape had been strung between us. And I will not pretend that didn't sting, because isolation is a strategy, and it works. You know what I mean. So I did the thing that always gives me back a little agency. I went to pull records in person, old brick building glass on a chain around the clerk's neck. The kind of office that smells like paper and coffee breath. And I requested the deed chain back 50 years. Any covenants, any HOA filings, and paid for certified copies. Plus a notarized statement confirming no HOA registration exists for my parcel. And when the clerk stamped that paper, it felt like a small fence went up around me. Not the kind that shuts people out. The kind that keeps lies at bay. Back home, I scanned and backed up everything. Then I started on the people, because paper tells you what, and people tell you how. And Vanessa had a trail you could follow with a cheap flashlight. 3 failed LLCs. Civil suits that settled quiet complaints that never reached revocation, but left a smell. Meanwhile, Garrett Finch didn't appear in the active law enforcement database at all. And the only record I found was a termination note from a county overcertification, revoked 4 years ago for excessive force during a traffic stop, which explains the posture, if not the choices. I went looking for allies, the old-fashioned way, a plate of store-bought cookies and a knock, and the woman across from me, Mrs. Brennan, let me in and told me a version of my Thursday with a 2-year head start. How the same woman had tried to sell her panic with shrub rules until her son, a lawyer, told them to walk, and she wrote it down for me handshaking. And I realized again that fear and fury look like twins in poor lighting. In the days that followed, more neighbors talked. A retired teacher showed me the math of his regret. Sold at $190K under pressure for a house easily worth $420K, and said the sentence that still hits me in the ribs. I just wanted it to stop, and I told him what I tell myself in the mirror. When my jaw gets tight, peace is not a gift from bullies. It's a boundary you draw with receipts. Midway through this, I called Emma Reyes, a reporter I'd mentored years ago, who still believed that sunlight is a disinfectant, even when it stings. And I said I've got a pattern with exhibits, and she asked the only question that matters. How tight is it? And I said, tight enough to survive bad faith, so she came over. I put on coffee that tasted like determination, and I walked her through slides, my deed with no covenants. Their bylaws with Garamond circled the fake notice with the wrong county name, the map of which mailboxes got, which flyers, the audio of Vanessa saying demolish in 30 days, and Finch saying we have authority without the decency of a badge. And I did not rant, because facts don't need my mood to be true. That night, I posted a careful redacted account on a legal forum, not for sympathy for strategy. And within hours, I had messages from 2 counties over describing the same duo, the same script, the same pressure timeline. And I filed 3 formal complaints with tracking numbers. You could read with a magnifying glass, State Attorney General for fraud, County Sheriff for impersonation licensing board for professional misconduct. And I photographed each certified envelope like they were my kids on the first day of school. Because one day in court, a small photo becomes a big moment. Then something clicked that I wish I could call clever, but was really just practical. If there's no legitimate HOA here, and that vacuum lets a fake authority step in. What if we create the thing the law recognizes, but we build it to protect, rather than police. So I drafted bylaws for a real association with tiny teeth. Road maintenance, streetlights, transparent budgets open, meetings, an annual audit, no architectural review, no lawn rules, no color charts, nothing that tells you how to live on your own porch. And I went door to door with the most boring pitch you've ever heard that somehow got people to sign. Because boring can be safety when you've been spooked by shiny scams. We needed 15 households to petition. I brought in 22. We filed with the county. And the state paid the fee. Waited for the stamp, then held a living room vote, and they made me president. Because I knew the difference between a seal and clip art. And the first letter we sent on that letterhead went to Vanessa. You have no authority here. Any future contact will be considered harassment and referred to council. And yes, I sent it certified. And yes, I kept the green card, because I'm me. The story ran front page the next week. Emma verified what she could independently, the way good reporters do. The AG's office gave a tight comment that smelled like movement, and the neighborhood changed temperature in a day. Hands that used to avoid my eyes came to my porch. With apologies, more victims surfaced, and a courier brought me a cease and desist that accused me of defamation in bold fonts, which my consulting attorney answered with the prettiest phrase the law allows. Every statement is supported by public records and sworn testimony. We welcome the opportunity to present this evidence. Around then, Garrett Finch decided that the only way out was through someone else, and his lawyer cut the deal everybody learns about by episode 3 of any legal show. Cooperation for leniency, and he gave up emails that made my stomach do that cold drop. Subject lines like standard protocol and Q2. Targets lines about elderly owners and estimated profits and scripts for porch intimidation. Yeah, that happened. And when I added those to the binder, I felt the case shift from defense to offense. The preliminary hearing hit the calendar for day 68. Judge Elena Thorne, presiding 23 years on the bench and a reputation for expecting adults to act like it. And I arrived early with a 3-inch binder divided into 9 tabs. Because color tabs are how I remember that chaos can be organized, and the courtroom filled with faces from Maple Street people who wanted something to draw a line between their doorstep and the next knock. I connected my laptop to the court projector, took a breath that didn't want to come, and told the judge what this was. Not a landscaping spat, not a bruised ego, but a manufactured authority used to pressure owners into sales below value. Then I put up slide 1. My deed and chain of title, no covenants, slide 2. A real county to notice with a raised seal, side by side with the neon sticker. From my door note, the wrong county name note, the missing seal. Slide 3. Vanessa's bylaws on fancy paper with Garamond. Body text and a pixelated crest with no filing stamp. Slide 4. The audio from my porch, where a voice that sells certainty says, demolish in 30 days, and a voice that sells fear says we have authority, and then the witnesses took their oaths and told their lives in pieces, Mrs. Brennan, describing how a legal threat dissolved the day her son said the word, the retired teacher naming the number he lost without looking at anyone, the forensic document examiner explaining like a patient aunt why these seals were just images, and these signatures just decorative intent. And finally, Garrett Finch, smaller in a suit than he tried to be in nylon, saying under oath that Vanessa hired him, bought the uniform, wrote the script, paid him per visit to stand there and make the lie look real. Vanessa's lawyer tried to make it about me. You called the press, you formed an association, you're seeking damages. And I answered what I could, without heat, because the judge wasn't grading my temper. I answered a reporter's questions with records that we built a narrow association to prevent fake ones from filling a vacuum. The damages are how the system admits harm out loud. And when I put up the email that said, target next quarter, elderly widow, minimal family contact, estimated profit $200K, the room went silent enough to hear the pencil on the clerk's pad. And I let it sit because you can't improve certain truths by talking over them. Judge Thorne spoke like a metronome set to steady. Likelihood of success on the merits established preliminary injunction granted defendants prohibited from contacting property owners across 3 counties. Matter referred to the district attorney for criminal review, and her gavel sounded like the first real boundary in 2 long months. Not victory. Music, not absolution, but a line you could point to when someone asked if any of this had actually mattered. I walked out into light that didn't feel performative, and stood on the courthouse steps, and didn't smile for any cameras, because this wasn't a parade. It was a pause. And the truth is complicated, because forming any association makes some of you itch, even a modest one. And I get it. A lot of people hear HOA and think paint swatches and fines and someone counting your weeds, and others hear it and think street lights that work, and snow plows that arrive, and budgets you can actually read. And the only promise I can make is the one we wrote into the bylaws. Architectural standards, no meddling in your porch life. Keep the books open. Keep the powers. Narrow sunset. Any clause that starts to creep. Cut the ivy before it covers the brick. And if we fail, that hold a vote, and cut us out, because power should be removable where you live. I didn't plan to become the guy with a binder and a projector. I came here to sand floors and match the exact shade of red my grandfather picked from a hardware store that's gone now. But sometimes the fight chooses your porch, and you either build a case or you lose your house. And I don't mind telling you, I was scared in little ways, like when the neighbor stopped waving, like when the anonymous text said, "Stop now before it's too late." Like when I couldn't sleep. And the house settled. And I wondered if the next knock would come at 6 a.m. with flashing lights. But fear turned into lists, and lists turned into exhibits, and exhibits turned into a judge's injunction. And while criminal cases crawl at their own speed, and civil trials count damage, like a cold accountant, piece already sounds closer than it did on day 1. So here's my ask. If you stuck with me this far, tell me where you land on this line between protecting a neighborhood and policing it. Tell me if any HOA can be redeemed when it stays in its lane, or if the lane always widens on its own. Tell me if you've seen a fake inspector, or a bogus notice on a door, or a pressure campaign that ended in a too-cheap sale, and what worked when you pushed back and dropped your city and your time. You know what I mean. Because stories like this travel, and maybe someone on your block needs the blueprint I wish I had on Thursday at 9 a.m. And if you think this was right or wrong, or both, argue it in the comments, so the next person under a neon sticker can read the arguments and find a way to keep what's theirs.